All right. Hello, everyone. This is the first episode for the Into the Darkroom podcast for the fall semester of 2023. I'm Leona Hatch, and I'm here with my new co-host,
Rylee Hohney.
And we're here today to interview PCAD's newest professor, AJ Nutter.
Hi, everyone.
Yay!
Oh, thanks for having me.
So for the first thing, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. I guess I'm Professor Nutter, and I am here now teaching under the new filmmaking minor, which is really exciting and something new to PCAD. And I've been working with Eric Weeks to help design some of the classes, which is really cool. And I'm a PCAD alum, so go PCAD.
Heck yeah! So where are you originally from?
I'm originally from here, from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I've lived in Philadelphia, and currently I live in Harrisburg.
Very nice, very nice.
And you said you went to college here, but did you go anywhere else for college?
Yeah, before I went here, I went to the Art Institute of Philadelphia for video production, and it was a cool experience. It was really different than like how my education was here at PCAD. It was more like hands-on and more like commercial kind of video, where here my experience at PCAD was more like a fine arts degree in photography, so it was more just like going beyond like the camera and the gear more into like the meaning and what you're trying to get out of your art and convey your art and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Interesting. So did you end up pursuing the career that you went to school for?
Yeah, more or less. I mean, I'm just like a creative person, so I've always done creative stuff. It's like what keeps me happy and what I like to do. If I wasn't doing that, I probably wouldn't be very happy. So like, I knew I always wanted to do creative projects, whether it's like doing movies or short films, or whether that's music, or I'm doing a lot more podcasting now, which is really cool. So just like all kinds of stuff, anything creative. That's what I like to do.
I think a lot of art-minded people are similar in that aspect of without art, we probably would not be as happy as we are.
And you got to do what makes you happy too.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, it was always about like expressing myself, and I always get like a really great satisfaction when I make something. I'm like really excited about it, and like there's few things I get that with in life, so I've always found myself coming back to that, like to doing creative stuff that makes me happy.
So then what drew you to filmmaking rather than any other art form?
So when I was younger, I would hang out with my dad and we'd watch movies together like every Friday night, and that was just like our thing we did as like a family. And my dad always approached films as art, so it was always like a conversation about like, what do you think about this film? What do you think was interesting about this one? So it just kind of like built over the years, I guess. So just like watching movies and kind of falling in love with cinema as like an art form more than just like entertainment. So it just kind of always have been a visual person. I'm dyslexic, so I feel like that's one of the ways that has driven me towards like visual media, and working in visuals is just where I excel really well. So just like naturally, I've always been kind of drawn to films.
And how has your film style changed over time in the style that you like to shoot film?
I think it depends. So like this most recent project was like me and my friends made a full feature independent film, a science fiction psychological thriller, which I don't recommend for your first movie. It's lots of layers and it's very difficult. But for that instance, it was all about like, how do we get that story across and that look and feel to match the story? And it's kind of how I approach films and short films. It's like, what are you trying to convey visually, especially if you're doing like the cinematography, which is what I usually do. It's like for instance, you have a character in a scene and maybe the character is going through something. How do you convey that with the camera? Like, what is going to help convey and propel the story forward in that moment?
Describe to us your dream film project, if you could pick like the plot, the setting, everything.
Yeah, everything. I don't know, something with a budget. I feel like with independent films, like it's really hard because it's always a question of how much money you can get or how much money you have. And often, like with Transient, we started a GoFundMe and we raised about $25,000, which was really exciting. We built an audience to do that, and without that, we wouldn't have been able to like achieve what we wanted to achieve. And I think like it's so hard to make a movie, let alone anything. I always like celebrate someone for just attempting it, because it is really hard and really difficult, and without money you can't do that. So to me, it's always like a matter of like, we have this really cool story. How do we tell it in a way where we know we're not going to have a lot of money to do that, and then, get a nice, product at the end of it.
Yeah.
Would you say you've made sacrifices in that film project to accommodate your budget that you wish you didn't have to sacrifice or would have made the film better?
Yeah, all the time. The biggest thing is time, right? Because every day you set up, you start filming, people need to be fed. You know what I mean? Like, money is burning constantly. So it's a matter of, like, speed and, like, efficiency, which is really hard to do when you're on, like, an independent film set. And a lot of times you wear different hats. You're doing different roles all the time. Like for instance, on Transient, I would show up early to set before everybody else and start setting up lights just to save time, you know what I mean? So when the actors got there and got prepared, they'd be ready to jump in, and there wouldn't be any time wasted. So it was always about just like, how do we get more time out of this situation to make something great? Because the more time you have, the more takes you can take, the better outcome will be. And then there's times where you don't have time, and you just have to, like, it's a shame. You just have to roll with it, and make the best of the situation, which is another really big challenge of filmmaking completely. It's not always going to be how you picture it,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can definitely see that.
Yeah, it's a hard thing.
Yeah.
There's sacrifices that have to be made, like, for everybody when you're working on, like, small movies.
Yeah, that makes sense. So throughout your entire career, because you've had a lot of experience in your career now.
Sure, yeah.
Who has been the most influential person?
That, like, I've worked with, or, like...
That comes to the top of your head.
I guess I'd say Chris Rupert, who's the director. So I've known Chris since, it's funny, we talked about this a lot. I went to second grade with him. And then,
wow.
Yeah, and then
Small world.
Yeah, and then he moved away, and I hadn't seen him. I ran into him. It's such a weird thing, but we went to high school together, like junior, senior, and we reconnected again through, like, music. But he's, like, one of my creative collaborators. Like, I have different people I do projects with, and mostly with, like, filmmaking, I work with Chris a lot because we're on the same level, we're on the same plane, we have, like, the same things we like and the same ideas for art, so just, like, we work really well together. So, like, when this project came up, this was something I worked with him and a couple other people to, like, make come to fruition. And probably a lot of the projects I work in the future, at least related to, like, films, will probably be with Chris because we just have so much in common, and we know what we want and can move quickly.
Yeah, you gotta have that chemistry with people you work with.
Yeah, and that's the hard thing about films, because it's a lot of people you don't know coming together, and there's lots of different, like, attitudes and styles in the room and personalities, and you have to, like, be able to work with people that sometimes you're not going to get along with. It's just the way it is, and then, try to get a great outcome in the end, regardless of that. And sometimes people click really well and things work out great, and sometimes they don't, and you just have to, like, roll with it.
So, can you tell us about your favorite job in the industry that you've had?
Favorite job? Oh, man. I worked on the short film once called Work Sucks, which you could find on YouTube if you search for it. It was a horror comedy. And I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Renfield that came out recently.
I want to see that so badly.
It's a similar idea to what we did, except for our short story was about this guy who's a cleanup man for the vampires. So after they, like, murder everybody, he comes in and his job is to, like, clean up after them and take care of everything. So that was a really fun project to work on. It's fun to do comedies, too. I was like, there's so many different styles of comedy, but people really like that movie. And we got into a bunch of, like, horror film festivals with it and, like, traveled around with it, which was really cool. Yeah.
Okay, so how do you get through? Because I always wonder this when, like, a comedy is happening. How do you get through the scenes without, like, bursting out laughing? Like, how many takes do you genuinely have to do?
A lot of takes. And yeah, there's different styles of comedy. And this was really, like, slapstick and, like, very over the top silly. Like, we had, like, bad costuming on for, like, the vampire characters, and this guy has to do this job because they're vampires. They forced him into it, kind of thing. So yeah, it's a silly concept.
Knowing myself, I would have probably cracked up more often than getting good, clean takes because I'm quite the laugher.
That's fair. Well, the hardest thing about, like, that was a book drop. The hardest thing about, like, doing a short film like that is like all the blood and gore effects and making a huge mess everywhere. And how do you do that well without, like, you know, depending where you are, like staining walls, and like there's so many levels to it when you get into that kind of stuff.
Oh, yes. I work with a lot of fake blood for my thesis, and I always have to watch, like, is this going to stain or is this going to stain?
It's critical. Like,
Oh,
you
yeah.
can say it. Yes.
What is the best product you found to remove fake blood?
Oh,
Oh
yes.
man, oh gosh, just throwing stuff out, I think.
Completely
Bleach,
destroy
maybe.
it.
Well, it depends on I guess the fake blood and what you're using. Like, you can make your own fake blood, like with certain products and stuff like that, or you can like buy fake blood. So it just depends on what process you're going with.
Okay.
Fair.
Good to know for the future.
Yeah, I figured that question might benefit Leona a little bit based on her thesis.
There's a lot of blood involved.
Oh, that's fair.
What's your biggest pet peeve that you've experienced during video production or film production that really like gets under your skin?
Or in your career at any point.
Yeah.
I'm a real stickler for like time management and like showing up on time and doing stuff because like money is moving right as you go, and I hate when people aren't prepared or they're in a role and they're not capable of doing the role that they're assigned. And that happens a lot with like independent stuff, because you get a lot of people, maybe it's like their first time working on a movie or something like that, and it's always frustrating to me because that does happen, and then it's like everyone else has to kind of pick up the slack and figure things out.
Ah, yes. We love when that happens.
Yeah, it's not the best.
Yeah. If you wrote a film about your life, what would be the big turning point in your career as like the climax moment in the film?
Oh wow, that's quite the question.
Like what you can think of right now. It's a loaded question, I understand.
I don't know. I think like, you know, I really love what I do, and I'm really happy to be able to do it now on like a kind of like a little larger scale than previously. I'm more excited for like the future and what these future projects hold and what the outcomes of those are going to be. Like, I'm working on this this podcast where we went to a women's prison and interviewed women on death row, and that's like, I'm really excited to see what that's going to play out to be, like when that gets released, and what the reception of something like that's going to be like. So I think there's lots of like cool things coming up in that sense.
Do you know where people can view that podcast once it's released?
Yeah, it's called Self-Identities, Conversations with Convicted Women. We're in the process of like final edits with it right now, and we're kind of pitching it to a couple of different like podcast networks to see if there's any interest, but ultimately probably in a couple months it'll be coming out just everywhere. It'll be on any podcast platform you want, so just keep your eyes peeled for it.
I do enjoy podcasts. Podcasts make for a great thing when you're driving long distances.
Yeah, definitely. Or like when you're doing dishes or like mowing the yard or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's a great way to stay educated. And this podcast is all about educating people of like what it's like to be a prisoner inside a prison. Like, we went into the prison, which is like really unusual to get access to that level. And we sat down with these women and we talked to them, each woman for an hour. So each woman has like their own episode. And it's cool. The conversation is not about like what they did or the crime. It's more like a reversal where it's about who they are as people. Mm-hmm. You know, like what are their interests? What was life growing up for them? Like what is life now for them? And we kind of dive into like more conversation about them as a person, because one of the things we got into doing with this podcast, I'm working with this Dr. Caitlin Whiteley, who specializes in criminology, is that there's so much stuff out there that sensationalizes crime and paints people kind of as monsters and as like things to be scared of, especially with like the true crime boom, you know what I mean, and that kind of stuff out there. So it's our whole point of doing this is like, let's turn it around and do something that's about them as people, that people can relate to. You know, they're just people, you know, and that's kind of the whole concept with it.
I love that idea of pulling people away from their situation and getting to learn more about them rather than where they are currently in their lives, whether that be prison or...
And how they ended up there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or like people who are addicts, who are in recovery.
Mm-hmm.
I think that learning about their past stories is much more beneficial to the public than why are you here? What did you do to get here?
Yeah, absolutely. And often, like, especially with these women and these kind of cases, is there's always someone else talking for them. Whether it's like a newspaper reporter or someone in court that represents them, they never get to speak for themselves. And this is kind of like the idea that here's a platform where you can do that.
So where did you say this podcast was going to be?
It'll be everywhere. It'll be on iTunes. It's going to be on every single platform.
Spotify?
Yeah, Spotify.
Nice.
Something like 30.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's going to be everywhere.
I'm definitely going to take a listen to that.
Yeah.
Do you have a title for it yet?
It's called Self-Identities, Conversations with Convicted Women.
Cool.
That sounds very
I
interesting.
will
It's
definitely
it's
keep an eye
very
for it.
heavy.
Oh, yes.
I put the warning out there. It's extremely heavy. So, especially for people that may have gone through trauma, I don't necessarily recommend jumping into it because there's a lot of like really big themes and stuff that just pop into the conversation. But it's very moving stuff.
That sounds very interesting, and I'm very much looking forward to that.
I am too.
So how many films, we're going back to your
Yeah,
filmmaking.
let's do it.
How many films have you produced?
Quite a few. From like ridiculous horror to serious dramas. I have 2 cheesy horror movies that I'm like an executive producer on, where like I basically just like put up a little bit of money for them. I'm not like on set doing anything for them or anything like that. But I don't know, probably like mostly like short movies, probably like 7 or 8 that like produced or put my own money into it, and you know, that kind of sense.
Mm-hmm. And can we find these movies anywhere?
Yeah, mostly online. Like, I don't know, you can go to my IMDb page, I guess, and look for them. I know Transient right now, which is like the big film we made, is basically going on the festival circuit now. So it's going to play in all these different festivals, and we're trying to sell the movie. So the idea is that we would sell this film to a distributor that might buy it and put it on, you know, Netflix or Hulu or something like that. That's kind of the end goal, with the idea of like, let's try to sell this movie, get some money, then make another one. You know what I mean? So
just imagine if you and I watch that movie on Hulu or Netflix, we can be like, oh my gosh, our professor made this.
Exactly. Are you thinking of making a sequel to this original Transient movie, or are you guys thinking something completely different? What if you get to sell this movie and make that money?
I think we're going to make a full feature of Work Sucks.
Yes!
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're going to completely turn around and do a silly comedy next, probably.
Comedies are great.
Yeah, and it'll be much more, probably more lighthearted and easier to make.
Like, I imagine
a serious drama. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's going to be so much fun. So, now for your overall art. What is the best compliment that you've ever received?
Man, I don't know. I had a friend recently send me a text message, and they said they went on my website, and they were like, they just thought it was awesome. They were going through my projects. It's like, oh man, this is so cool. You're doing so much right now. And it's just like, that was nice. Like a nice moment. Like, that I didn't expect. It just came out of nowhere. You know, I hadn't talked to this person for quite a while. So it was cool. So like stuff like that's really nice when someone like says like, I don't know, that they enjoy it or it's meaningful to them, right? Like, it's always great when you can inspire somebody.
That is always a great compliment.
Yeah.
I agree that getting feedback from people just giving you an overall like thumbs up is always really heartwarming and motivating to continue doing what you're doing.
Yeah, and with the movie, like we've had the movie go out to some people to watch just to get feedback, which is always helpful. And one of the best things I really like about that is when they say that they liked it and then they thought about it afterwards and talked about it for a while. You know, it's like it lingers with people, which was kind of the goal for something like this, which is really cool when you see that actually work the way you were hoping.
I hope that you guys get that response with your Incarcerated Women podcast, because I feel like the way that society is working now, if it reaches to a certain extent, you'll get a level of feedback very similar to that, of people connecting with these women and having not only sympathy but understanding for them and seeing them more as human beings and rather than convicts.
Yeah,
that's the whole goal with it, like honestly. And it's interesting, like it was a real growing experience, like going into a prison and like interviewing women for like a week in prison. You know, like I had the whole experience. I had prison food, you know, I got to like walk around and experience a lot of stuff that they experience, and it's really completely different than what you may think. And often, like from what I understand, it's every prison's different in every situation, and it's pretty wild stuff.
what is your like top favorite tool that you use in the filmmaking field, and why is it your favorite?
Probably the camera. Because I use it every day pretty much, whether I'm making films or just like doing commercial work or whatever. I know you get a good camera. It's just like, I'm sure you know this, being photo and video students, or what are what you might be here is you get like a tool and you get better at it the more you use it, and you start to know it better and know its tricks and that kind of stuff. And yeah.
Do you have a favorite camera brand or model that you like to work with specifically?
Not really. It's so funny. There's like this. I feel like there's like different types of people when it comes to camera. There's like people that are like really into like the tech side of it and like the collecting, and I have to have this new item, and like to me it's more just like give me whatever and I'll make something with it. Like I've always kind of been that way. I've never been like really interested in like this camera versus that camera. To me it's just like a tool that you use for anything else, and what the outcome's going to be maybe decides on what camera you use, or more importantly the lens, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. The lens can do a lot of different things. How did you end up becoming a professor here? Like, you graduated from here, and then you came back.
Yeah, it's a crazy story. Like, I never thought I would get into teaching. Like, it just kind of happened. I fell into it. I was working at Lebanon Valley College in, like, the marketing department, and I was making content, photo and video kind of work for the college, which was a lot of fun. And then they had an opening where they needed someone to teach video courses, and they came to me and they're like, well, you know more about this than we do. Like, would you be interested in trying this out and teach like a class? I was like, I thought about it for a long time. I was like, it sounds like a real challenge. Sure. And I tried it, and it was a lot of fun. I had a good, a really good time just like teaching students different things. And like, I don't know, the fun thing with like teaching, at least for me, is like when you find a student that has like a passion and like whatever, or an interest, that you're able to use what you're teaching them in a way to make that interest like excel in a way that works for them, no matter what it is, whether they're into video, film, or photography, or not at all. You know what I mean? It's always a cool thing.
Yeah, that sounds really cool.
And I guess I did answer your question, which I didn't do. I came here then because Eric Weeks reached out to me, and they were talking about adding minors to the college in filmmaking, and knew that I was teaching classes at LVC, which is pretty cool. And then the other thing I found out with coming back here too is there's a lot of alums I went to school with that are working here now, which is awesome to see, because that wasn't necessarily always the case, and it's really cool to see students that have gone here that love the school, that are working for the school now and really have that passion for it. It makes a huge difference.
It does.
And I think the school owes you guys, you alums that are coming back, to put in your time here, a lot of credit on why the school is growing and building. You've all gotten the education from your professors and are now coming back to take their place with your more modern education and experiences you've had that they haven't been able to have while teaching in the field. So we get to learn from you guys about what you've done after your education to grow our education, to be able to go and do bigger, better things. And I personally take your course, and I really, really enjoy it. It's
cool.
A lot of fun.
Well, that's great. I'm glad to hear. Like, yeah, that's exactly how it works. And it's interesting, like, even from, like, my time when I went here to how the school is now, it's changed a lot. And it's grown a lot, which is really exciting. And as you had mentioned, like, everything's always changing, especially with technology. When you look at, like, video and photo stuff, it changes every day. So there's always something new to learn, to stay on top of, like, the changes.
Mm-hmm. There is always something new.
Yeah, it never stops in this field. That's part of the fun. So you have to love learning to stay in it and be like relevant.
And they just keep pumping out new cameras.
Yeah.
All of the fun stuff.
Yeah, and then your camera stops doing updates on file storage and you have to go and buy another one.
I feel like you have personal experience with that.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
It's funny how that works with the camera, right? Because like back in the film days, you would have like your medium format and you'd have it your whole life, right? Because it was just like that was the camera. And now it's about like every year a new camera comes out. Oh, I got to get the new camera,
Yeah.
So
You got to modernize the equipment, even though there's a teeniest, tiniest little change
right?
from last year's model to this year's. everybody goes crazy.
And to tell you, I don't think it really matters. Like, a good example, when we were making Transient, we had two cameras. We had an Epic Red, which is like a $40,000 camera, and we had a Blackmagic Pocket, which is like a $1,000 camera. And they both shoot RAW. One shoots like higher quality, right, like 8K or something.
Wow.
But when we actually started comparing the footage, and we're using the same lenses, there's not a lot of difference in what you get. You know, that's the cool thing too about like technology today is like, it's much more accessible for like price point and stuff, and you can make a movie on your iPhone. People do it every day. Like, it's that's the exciting thing about it. Like, I feel like it's much more accessible for people now to make stuff creatively than it was before.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. Who are your biggest influences in your film style?
I guess for like, I'm doing a lot more cinematography when I work on movies, so I look at cinematographers and what they're doing, or study older movies. I really like a lot of 60s and 70s movies, like all kinds of stuff. I like 60s and 70s like Italian horror movies because they do a lot of weird creative stuff with lighting and camera work at that time. So it just depends, and like on the project too. Like I said, like you go into a project and you're looking at it, it's like, what's the best way to tell this story with a camera, and the choices you make that will help propel it forward, whether that's like adapting a style or filming a certain way or using a certain lens. Like, there's all these things that can combine together to get like this great final product with it.
Have you ever seen anything by David Lynch?
Yes.
I became a fan of him in my movie class last year.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
What did you watch?
Oh, it was Lost Highway.
Lost Highway?
That was so good. I want to watch it again because there were so many Easter eggs throughout it, and
Yeah.
I'm like, I didn't pick up on them, but I want to watch that, and I'm such a huge fan of him now.
Yeah, there's someone who has like a really definitive style and way of making movies that's more left up to like collecting what is happening in kind of an abstract way sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy.
He is.
I've seen a few of his movies only in clips of them, and I will agree that they're all very... You can tell that they're from him.
It's like a
Yeah.
hook, and you just want to
Yeah.
watch more.
I want more. Give me more.
I only asked that because I thought he was probably an influence.
Yeah, he makes some really interesting... Eraserhead, man, there's a strange abstract movie to watch sometime. That's one of his earlier films, Twin Peaks.
Eraserhead?
Yeah, you ever seen Eraserhead?
No.
It's black and white. It's really... It might be his first movie, I can't remember, but Blue Velvet, right? That's a classic. Check that one out.
I'm just going to binge watch all of his movies this Halloween season.
There's a lot.
Okay, so then finally, what advice can you give to people trying to enter the film industry or trying to, like, make it?
I think the biggest thing I would say for, at least in like the way I've experienced and worked through stuff, like just jumping in and finding even like little shorts to work on or in the community, because the more stuff you do, the more people you meet, and then more likely you're going to be brought back if they like you and you do a good job, right? So I'd say just like, don't be scared to like look up, try to find stuff locally to get started on. It doesn't have to be the way things are now too, especially with like streaming and technology. Like, you don't have to be in like California to make a movie. You can be anywhere. You can be in, look at YouTube. You can be in your house to make content and do it successfully. That's also the exciting thing. Like, there's really nothing holding you back other than yourself.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
It is a very fair point. I think a lot of art people need to overcome themselves to be able to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of self-doubt in the art world because there's always somebody who's a step ahead of you, but they're never the same. You can never be the same as someone else.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's hard. Like, I feel like a lot of people like to compare themselves to other people or other people doing other work, but you are your own person and you're creating your own stuff, and it's important to just go do it and not be scared about it. Like, it's okay if you make something that's not fantastic. It's a step to getting better. And something I always say is, like, you're going to fail at projects and you're going to make projects that are going to be bad, but that's okay because the next one's going to make you better for it. And you probably learned something from failing the first time. So you just got to be positive and keep going, especially if you love it. Like, I feel like often you'll work with someone who just made something and it didn't turn out so great, so they just quit or give up. And it's just not just the right attitude to take. You just got to like learn from that mistake or learn from that failure and move on. And sometimes you can make something that's amazing and no one sees it or hears about it, and that's also an outcome of making art. It's just how it works.
So stepping stones.
stepping stones
Everything
for sure.
is a stepping stone.
And a learning experience. Like when we made Transient, we made like a dozen short films before it, and every single one was a learning experience to get to the next one. Like we made this horror movie in the woods, and we never did something outside in Mother Nature, you know, like, and we were doing all kinds of things. There were planes flying over, causing audio issues, and just like that was a really good learning experience though, because now we know what to expect next time we have to do something like that. You know, like everything is a learning experience.
It is. Yeah. I mean, I'm learning right now.
Yeah, me too.
Good.
So that is all the questions that we have today.
Cool.
We would like to thank you for joining us, Professor Nutter.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is exciting. I can't wait to hear some of these other conversations you have.
So this is Leona and
Rylee.
signing off until next time.
See ya.
Woohoo!